Thanks for tuning in to the Mission Matters podcast, where we feature successful, mission-driven leaders committed to creating a positive change in the world. Our mission with this channel is to inspire other leaders by providing industry insights, new ideas, and inspiring stories from the pros.
All right, hello, welcome back. I'm Paul Fyth, host of the show where I talk with leaders heading up mission-focused organizations, leading from the heart, inspiring others, including myself, and making a difference in our communities. This episode is sponsored by Gregory Media, affectionately known as PGM, which is also a certified B Corporation. B stands for benefits. To learn more about, I take a breath here, learn more about a B Corporation or Paul Gregory Media, visit paulgregorymedia.com. Excited about today's episode. Welcome, Carolyn. You know, I didn't ask how to pronounce your last name in our pre-meeting here. It's Carolyn and...
It's Wahlskog.
Wahlskog.
Wahlskog, yeah.
Wahlskog. Okay. Carolyn Wahlskog, Director of Operations and Programming for Youth Outlook. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I can't wait to dive into Youth Outlook because I know you did a stint before here at 360 Youth Services. But, you know, let's back up. Give me your life story. Tell me about your journey, what led you to 360 and ultimately to Youth Outlook.
Well, here we go. So I am a social worker, and I didn't think I would be a social worker. I found my way to Indiana University thinking I would be a nurse. And like many college freshmen taking anatomy first semester, that plan quickly changed. And so I ended up actually getting my degree in speech and hearing science. And I thought I'd be a speech pathologist. And one of the requirements of that is that you have to shadow in clinics. And as I was shadowing, you know, I noticed the clinicians were upset with a parent because they didn't feel that she gave her kid enough practice during the week of what they should have been working on. And I sat there and I listened to that. And then I saw the mom get on like 2 different city buses to get back home. And so I really found like that model felt deficit based, and I really wanted to work on the strengths. And so I found myself looking into social work and ended up going to University of Illinois at Chicago, UIC's Jane Addams College of Social Work. And actually where I work now, Youth Outlook was my first internship. And so I did my internship, worked there for a while, and then found my way back here a couple of years ago.
Wow. And so in between that, though, you had a stint, a long one, I think, right, at 360 Youth Services?
Yes. So when I graduated, I was hired at 360 Youth Services in the housing program, just a little part-time position with a master's degree. It wasn't exactly what I thought I would be doing right away. But within a few months, we were awarded some funding to start a specific program to house LGBTQ, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender young people who are experiencing homelessness. It was the first of its kind in our region in the Midwest. And so along with my boss, Deb Robertson, who many people know, Deb made a huge impact on the housing world for young people in our county. We opened, the first LGBTQ specific transitional housing program, which is still running today.
Wow. And that was, what year was that?
That was 2014.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So we're coming up on 11 years soon.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So, and then you ended up back at Youth Outlook.
Yes. So over my career, I started, like I mentioned, just working a couple nights a week, became a case manager, a program manager. And when I left, I was the executive director of housing. So I oversaw our housing programs, our group home, and then obviously was there during the beginning of the pandemic where we started an emergency shelter. So the first youth emergency shelter in DuPage County through a hotel program. And I love housing. I never thought I could do anything else besides that. Feels like the most important thing, right? But it's also 24/7. You never really turn your brain off. And so it was time for a change. And given my experience and my passion for working with LGBTQ youth, I was able to come back to Youth Outlook. We had grown enough to be able to bring me on full time as the director of operations and programs. So I've been back for 3 years, and it feels like, given the, with within the LGBTQ world, we made a lot of progress really quickly in the 2010s. And with increased visibility comes increased backlash. So I kind of came back to Youth Outlook at a time where we really started to see some of the progress that had been made start to be chipped away at through different legislation. So I feel like as much as I miss the housing world, I'm in the right place to, use my gifts to work towards helping organizations, schools, and other providers to create more LGBTQ affirming programs and policies.
Making an impact, yeah. So, well, let's just go right into the Youth Outlook then. What do they do exactly? What services do they provide?
Youth Outlook is probably one of the best kept secrets of DuPage County. And so hopefully through this podcast, we'll reach more ears so that people actually know we exist. But we've been around for 27 years. We started in the mid-90s with a group of social workers who wanted a place for queer and trans young people to find community within DuPage versus having to go down to Boys Town. And so we started with just a simple mission of one drop-in center, one group for kids to meet. And we thought, great, we'll create a group and one of the many nonprofits in DuPage will want it. And mid-90s, no one did.
You said something there. You said drop-in center where kids can meet. So explain that concept of a drop-in.
Sure. So a drop-in center is like a social support group. So think about a youth group. So it's a space that's not clinical. It's a space for youth to come together for educational, recreational, just support, just to be with other LGBTQ peers and their allies.
And so is there a program or a structure there, or is it?
Yes. So all of our groups run like one night a week in each of their locations. So we started with one group and now we have 11 in-person drop-in centers throughout the North and Central Illinois. And so youth arrive at 6:30 and it's kind of, we have an open hangout time till 7. And we do kind of a formalized check-in. And then the last hour and a half, we do programming. And so it's all driven by what youth are interested in. So they might learn about LGBTQ history, learn about their rights, or they might, have a Renaissance fair or paint pumpkins or, do things that like typical young people want to do to build connections and with each other, really with the idea of reducing isolation.
Okay. And then you have 11 of these centers, you said, through how many different counties?
So we're in 8 different counties. So we have the drop-in centers for the youth, and those are typically ages 12 to 20 who can come to those. And then we launched a group 2 years ago called Rainbow Sprouts for kindergarten through 6th graders, because we were seeing the coming out age coming younger and younger. So that has a parent component. We have parent groups, and then we also do community education and professional development so that organizations that want to be better around this community but just don't know how, we go in and, help them look at what they can do to make it people feel more comfortable.
Okay. So this Rainbow Sprout from kindergarten to, you said 6th grade?
Yeah.
So those are parent assisted or
Yeah. So the parents are there on site. So the parents kind of have their own little support meeting, and then the youth do activity based. So it's not really so much focused on the community, talking about LGBTQ topics with them. It's just making friends who may be similar to them, whether their parents are LGBTQ, they are themselves, or their siblings.
Okay. And so you have 11 drop-in centers across 8 counties. Each of these drop-in centers are open once a week.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So that's a lot to manage.
Yes. And so we're a small team. When I started as an intern in 2011, we had 1 full-time staff member and a handful of part-time folks. Now we have 7 full-time staff, about 20 part-time people, and then we use over 150 volunteers a month in all of our different drop-in centers to make all of that magic happen.
Right. I mean, there's somebody who's got to organize all that, and there's somebody's got to lead those programs, right?
Yeah.
And are those volunteers too, or are they paid staff?
Our paid staff are they're at the group every single week. They do some of the outreach, so there's consistency. And then we have adult volunteers. They may be part of the LGBTQ community or allies that come in and give their time, once a month or more than that, so that we have enough adults in the space.
Okay. So I'm getting the picture being painted by you that Youth Outlook is this series of drop-in centers across the state. across 8 counties that is a safe place for people to just go make friends, hang out, do the things that they like to do, that kids like to do, and adults. And then you have the Sprout, is it Rainbow Sprout program? So is that all encompassing of Youth Outlook, or is there more?
So that's like our direct service programs. We then, like I mentioned, do a community education and professional development. So we work with school districts, we work with mental health providers, we work with businesses who want to take a look at their services. So we help. Illinois has an LGBTQ inclusive curriculum requirement. But teachers didn't really learn about people from LGBTQ history. So we'll help teachers learn about that. We may help a business think about having a gender neutral restroom, or how can they greet their clients without using like sir or ma'am if one of the clients is non-binary, those types of things. And then our newest program is called Health and Wellness Navigation. So we have 2 folks that are kind of like case managers that help people find doctors and therapists in the area that have experience with the LGBTQ community.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know there's a law firm also in Naperville, actually, that specializes in the LGBTQ community as well. So yeah, I'd imagine there's a growing list of those resources. So you got the educational element going between school districts and businesses, and then you've got this. I don't know what you call this last program.
Health and Wellness Navigation.
Health and Wellness Navigation. Okay. So do they go around educating people about these resources, or is there like a master list of resources on the website?
Yes. So we have a list on our website that we're actually really proud of. It's probably 20 pages of anything you can think of, whether it's finding an affirming faith congregation, doctors, legal resources, podcasts, different things related to the LGBTQ community. So our navigators, I think we say even the most well-resourced families, when your kid comes out, what doctor do I go to? Do they have experience? Wait lists can be really long. What is the process going to look like? I think there's a lot of myths that are going around that if I take my child to the therapist, they're going to like change their gender in one day, and so we really, our navigators try to connect people that, take their insurance and cut out some of that stress of trying to find a provider who has done the work to really know how to affirm this population.
Sure. I mean, you've done the hard part, and having that resource, I'm sure, is very valuable. You've been doing this for a while, a number of years, between 360 Youth Services and here. There had been some bumps along the way. There had been some challenges that every leader faces. And I always like to maybe go through that leadership lens and maybe talk about some of the challenges that might end up helping, one of our listeners.
For sure. So I'm a millennial, and, I came into the workforce when everyone was hating on millennials, right? Our avocado toast issues or whatever. And so, as I've grown, in many of the organizations I've worked at the entry-level position all the way up through leadership. And so getting to experience those different things, I think, has really impacted me as a leader. And I mentioned my previous boss at 360, Deb Robertson. And one of the things she always told me was, I'm never going to ask you to do something I wouldn't be willing to do myself. And when you're working with kids with messy apartments and you might be cleaning those, right? Like I always like to be the leader that kind of is accessible to anybody that I'm working with. And also nothing is above me, right? It doesn't mean that I'm doing everything, right? But it's that that I'm not going to ask anyone to do that myself. So I think really building that culture is important to me, leading, not only doing this work that's so mission driven, but also doing it with values that align with, our goals of making the world better for queer and trans people. And one of the challenges that I experienced moving over to Youth Outlook is that we work virtually. So we're in our locations, that churches and community centers, but to see the kids, but then the other times we're, behind the Zoom screen. So I think it's figuring out how to keep the culture when you're not seeing each other in person every day. So how do you have conflict, right? How do you have differences of opinions when you have a screen between you, I think it can be challenging. And so, we were talking before we started recording of like, what's the recipe for how often people should be together in person versus virtual? And so I think that's a constant struggle that we're having as an organization to create those moments of connection working in a virtual world.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we used to live, or we used to visit the virtual world and the digital world, and now we kind of feel like we live there sometimes.
Yeah.
Back in the day when I had an office, we'd have 5-6 meetings a week, and now I have 5-6 meetings a day because it's just popping into Zoom, different channel. And when you see somebody in person, the connection is so real. You miss that.
Yeah.
I think so. That's a struggle that a lot of organizations having, and that's a good challenge to bring up, because culture is really important and connection is really important, and you miss it after a while. And like you said, maybe conflict. I don't know. In my opinion, sometimes conflicts arise quicker because you do have a screen separating you, and you're not so ready to do that in person. But that's just in my industry. I don't know. So have you found anything that's worked?
So a couple things I think that Youth Outlook does really well, and this even goes back to before COVID times, is that we cover 8 counties. We're not going to see folks that work at our Sterling drop-in center in person very often. But we have a really vibrant Facebook group for our staff and volunteers. And so it's really helpful to share ideas. So maybe Sterling had a special guest speaker that they really liked, and they'll post about it in the group. Or someone had a really creative idea at the Palatine group, and they we don't post pictures of the kids, right? But like post pictures of the crafts that we've done. And then that gets people connected, celebrating and highlighting birthdays and sharing resources and books. And so people are naturally on those different platforms. And so I think we've utilized that to really keep us connected. A challenge, of course, is that some people don't participate in Facebook. So they miss out on some of that. I think other times, which is something that we're still working on, is figuring out what's the recipe or for how often we should be in person, right? And so finding as a virtual organization, utilizing some of the churches or Paneras or wherever, like of figuring out when should we just come, even if it's not that dire, but just to sit next to each other and work together. So I think that's some of the things we've tried to be intentional about, and we'll continue to figure it out, this year.
Yeah, like a work party, or a work luncheon, in person. That's a great idea. But wait a minute, you said something. There's a millennial out there that's not on Facebook.
Well, listen, I work with Gen Z and starting to be Gen Alpha. So that's like not quite millennials, but it's like some of our 22-year-olds, 21-year-olds that, are volunteers that don't want to be. And I think for us as, LGBTQ folks, like things that we've seen happen on like the Facebook Meta platform just this week of that they're not going to like fact check anti-LGBT or interrupt anti-LGBTQ harassment. That impacts us as an organization to think about, is this a platform we can still continue to be on, right? And so we're not only navigating like the digital world, but also some of the attacks on the community of figuring out, okay, do we transfer over to Blue Sky or wherever? So some of the national conversation that's happening around LGBTQ stuff is still kind of in our own backyard.
Yeah, indeed. All right. I don't know if this has anything to do with anything, but I got to know. And I think maybe some of my listeners want to know this too. So we have the millennials.
Yeah.
Now, what comes after that?
Gen Z.
Gen Z. Okay. And then after that, Gen Alpha, now the 21, 22-year-olds entering the workforce?
Should be. And then Gen Beta, I think where anyone who was born in the last, in 2025, Gen Beta has now started. So we haven't quite even met really understanding what the alphas really have up their sleeve. But Gen Z is very much in the workforce now, and we'll start to see Gen Alpha.
Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. We now know Millennial, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, then Gen Beta just entering in 2025. Wow. It's hard to keep track because what is it, like every 3 years or 4 years? It's a new label.
I don't know
5 years.
what it is, but I just, I always say, no matter how old you get, like just being on TikTok just enough to know what the new words are that kids are saying. And that's why I like working with young people. You get to learn the words, and then you go tell your friends who don't work with youth. And by the time you teach them, it's not cool anymore. So
Right. Well, I mean, I'm always told I'm not cool. I watched Facebook Reels. They said, yeah, that's TikTok 2 years later. So, well, there you go. Well, I really appreciate you telling us about your journey, about all the wonderful services and safe spaces, and what actually also sounds like a fun time, really, getting together with peers and doing the things that they like to do, or things that are on their mind. And all the services. So I wish you a lot of luck with that. It almost sounds like you don't need it. It sounds like you're doing a great job, and you're very well qualified with your experience to continue the mission. Any parting thoughts for our guests, listeners?
Thank you again for having us today. And I think there can be a tendency right now to think that things are better for the LGBTQ community, that we've made progress, but we are really in the fight for our lives right now, especially transgender people. We, as Illinois folks who living in Illinois, and if you're listening from somewhere else, you may have a different experience, but we're having an influx of LGBTQ people move to Illinois to seek refuge and safety, to be able to access care. We are having conversations, in our community about, will our marriages continue to be valid? Will we receive health care? Will we be doxxed online for posting about our events? And even some of the partners in our work, just for having pronouns in their signature or having donors yell at them, right? So it's a difficult time right now. So my parting words is to take people seriously when they share about their fears, because it is people's children and their families that they're concerned about. And we need everybody in the fight. So I'm really proud of the work that we do as our organization, but we can't do it alone. And so, whether it's interrupting a joke that people say, or, questioning, and staying true to the policies that you put into place, that's my hope right now, is that people continue to fight for a lot of the procedures we put into place and keep our humanity, I guess.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we've seen some progress when you look at, maybe a decades long time, but still a ways to go. And our communities are about all people. And I don't think anybody could argue about that. So I thank you for being on the show. And I can't wait to dive in. How can people find out more about Youth Outlook?
Sure. So our website's youth-outlook.org, and we're Youth Outlook on various social media platforms. So follow along and, join us if you're interested.
Great. And if you're following along on the PGM website, there's a link right below the video that you're watching. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or one of the others, be sure to check out paulgregorymedia.com/podcast, where you'll see this video and all the links that have been mentioned during the show. Thanks for watching. Till next time, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Mission Matters podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.